GP's top 5 games. Can he shorten that list a little bit? I don't know. Listen and find out today on Welcome, everybody, to Press B to Cancel, the greatest podcast you'll listen to until the next one. Today is a special episode in our ongoing series of top 5s lists of the co-hosts. You've heard my top 5, Pulsh's top 5, and now another CO-tastic episode. GP of the Retro Therapy is going to give us his top 5 video games. How's it going, GP?
Doing great. How are you?
Well, I had that scary bout of hiccups earlier, but I think we'll get through this. As I mute my phone.
that was a very magical mute. I like that. That sound is in my top 5. How about that?
Oh, I tell you.
I've been in like list mode all week in preparation for today. My kids are not happy. Now they know where they stand.
Children, gather around. Give me your top 5 toys. The rest we're gonna throw out.
Shit.
No.
Would somebody actually do that to their kids?
Actually, you know what? Growing up, one of the neighbors' parents, that's what they do with their kid. And it's like, even to this day, that's how not to parent.
That is incredibly messed up. Who gives their kids 5 toys? See how I went a different direction there.
Growing up, my toy was a bucket of dirt. That's how we do it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that you could afford a bucket.
Were you one of those kids with the wiffle ball and not the bat?
Not the bat. Nice. No, we had what was it called? Wrench. We had wrench that we could play with, and it wasn't so much playing as it was standing there while my dad worked on the engine and yelled at me for not holding the wrench and flashlight correctly. So I guess that's 2, right? Flashlight and wrench.
Yeah, it's the same idea. They really do the same thing.
Sure.
Wow, this got off to a dark start.
Yeah.
So the one thing that Pulse mentioned during his episode was he felt his list was very fluid and it would change from week to week, depending on his mood for his games. Is that like that for you, or is your top 5 fairly fixed?
For the most part, there are staples or things that will always be there. I thought about getting on Twitter and looking back in my history because I've been tagged in a number of top 4, top 5, top whatever, retro video games. And this is a little bit more broad than just retro. Spoiler, all my shit is going to be retro. But I didn't do that because, like Paul had said, and like you've, recapped just now, it is fluid. But for the most part, the same franchises are there. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so.
All right. Well, let's start. Let's give us your number 5.
Number 5. Now, the reason that I'm saying this is not because it's my 5th favorite game, but because it is a type of game that I don't typically play. So, of the genre of games, it is the best, in my opinion. It checks off the box of soundtrack. It's got a great soundtrack, even though it doesn't need to have one, but also replayability. And that game is Tecmo Super Bowl, or Super Tecmo Bowl. I've heard it said both ways, but it's the one for the Nintendo 8-bit entertainment system, the NES.
I was going to say Moon Crystal, but I couldn't be more wrong.
No, but Moon Crystal is fun. Doing the blind run of that was great, and I was obsessed. But since then, I've gone back and I've played Tecmo Super Bowl probably 4 or 5 times, like full seasons. Yeah, this is a game I grew up playing with my brother. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, he and I had done a full competitive season where we start off, if you're familiar with American football, there's the AFC and the NFC, and half the teams are on one side, half the teams are on the other, and then one team from the AFC goes to the Super Bowl, one from the NFC goes to the Super Bowl, and that's how football is done. So anyway, we started off the season, I picked a team from the NFC, he picked a team from the AFC, and then we switched conferences. And then we would keep doing that until we whittled it down to just the last 2 teams. And hopefully we both made it to the Super Bowl. And but I'm not sure that our friendship did.
Well, how long would that take to go through an entire season like that?
Really, it's not too bad. A game itself can last about 10 to 15 minutes if you know what plays you're going to do.
Okay.
So it's really not too bad. We could sit down and within an hour knock out 2 or 3 games and have a couple of beers, and it was fun. But this is a game that goes back to my childhood. I grew up playing as the New York Football Giants. Lawrence Taylor. Need I say more? I'm not going to talk too much on this with specifics because I know a lot of people out there aren't into sports ball. I'm not into a lot of sports games, but I like some of them. Usually the ones I like are the more absurd ones. Mutant League Hockey, NBA Jam, these very weird takes. But Tecmo Super Bowl was just brilliant. The gameplay was great. Even though the schedules were set, you could play as whatever team you wanted. And honestly, you could change your plays. You could change your roster of characters. It was so incredibly customizable for that time. And even today, even though I have option of playing as any of these teams, I've really only ever done full seasons as maybe 5 or 6 teams. So by that reckoning, I've got another 145 years or so before I'm fed up with this game.
So again, for this one being your top 5, is it mostly because of the couch co-op type of thing?
Kind of. There's not a lot of co-op games that I have on my list here.
Okay.
I thought about putting Contra on the list because, of course, there's a huge nostalgia factor. And that is a game that I can play over and over, and I enjoy playing it with another person. Shout out to my wife and our first date. But that's, but Contra's not on the list. But no, yes, so the co-op thing is a blast. Doing it on your own is a blast. And again, graphically, playability, this is the ultimate replayability thing, even though there's not like a plot or unlockables. You can just play with any of these other couple dozen teams. So Hopefully that makes sense. And for being a sports ball game, it really is great. And then again, I cannot say this or emphasize this enough. The soundtrack, everybody put down your phones and look at me. Fucks.
Really? See,
yes.
When I think of good soundtracks, sports games don't usually come to mind.
But that's what I'm saying. It had no business being that good. The original Tecmo Bowl had a couple of bangers, and really it only has a couple of songs.
There's like one song on most of these games.
There's a couple. But with this, you've got the opener, you got the closer, you got the Super Bowl, you've got the game, the playoffs, and the Super Bowl have their own tracks. So it's just, and each one is solid. Like it has no business being as good as it is, and they didn't need to go that hard, but they did, and I've always liked it.
Okay, all right. You know what? And now I have to look this up just for the soundtrack because I'm one of those guys. I'm not really big into the sports games, but there's been a few that I've liked or have nostalgia for, like Sports Talk Baseball on the Genesis is one that I like. It's a gimmick, but I enjoyed it, so I can appreciate that.
If there's a way to play online, imagine, any number of mobile games now that you can play. Imagine Among Us, but instead of murderers, it's just Tecmo Bowl with your friends. If maybe it exists and maybe I don't know about it. If it does, somebody reach out and let me know. I would love to do that. I'd love to play that. With
the way I play Among Us, if I played Super Tecmo Bowl, within the first 30 seconds of a play, I would smash a red button and cry foul. That's how I'd roll.
That sounds like how I do sex. So let's move on.
Smash that button. Number 4.
Call foul, yeah. Oh, number 4, that you're back at me.
It's GP's top 5.
Let's go ahead and address... Actually, with number 4, we're going to go with Mega Man 4.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to know about number 3 now, or you just want to skip it?
Mega Man 4. You're not?
No, here's why. Are you serious? Yes, I love this game. In a similar way to Tecmo Super Bowl, there's a lot of nostalgia. You're going to see, you can just go ahead and say that for every one of my games here. They're all heavy with nostalgia. I've tried to remove that factor to kind of crystallize how I feel about my list, but it's hard to do. But here's the thing. Mega Man 1, great game. Good enough to warrant a follow-up. Mega Man 2, took a lot of the stronger parts of 1, but then they added some things, they refined some things, they took some other things out. They introduced, the iconic 8 instead of 6 robot masters you got to fight. They did the refights with the capsule teleporters instead of, organically coming across them through stages. They added the item weapons, item 1, item 2, item 3. They really refined the game in 2. 3 came out, and for as many faults as I feel that game has, they added Rush instead of items 1, 2, and 3, which is tremendous and a huge leap forward. And they introduced the slide, which is iconic.
Yes.
So then with 4, they nerfed Rush because he was a little OP in 3. They kept the slide. They added the Charge Buster, which is a huge reason I think it's one of the best ones. Because now every time you play a Mega Man game, that's something he can do, and it's become almost synonymous with the abilities for that franchise. But yeah, with 4 they added that. They tweaked Rush. They gave you the balloon and they gave you the wire. They didn't have to do that. You don't need them, but it's whatever. But the gameplay is great. It is crisp. It is colorful. The bad guys are great. And again, the soundtrack, you all know I love music.
Yeah.
So I talk a lot about that, but the soundtrack is above and beyond. I specifically think of Dustman for being kind of a weird character in a not that difficult stage. His soundtrack is amazing. Like that stage song for Dustman gives so many feels. Part of it's nostalgia, but I think anybody could hear it and be like, dude, yeah, shit's dope.
His stage might be garbage, literally, but that track is still pretty banging.
And if you look at the background, it's a garbage fire, right?
That's the joke. Yeah.
But it's
I also like
the truth.
Skullman's stage a lot as well. I do like Mega Man 4. Mm-hmm. I know we've argued about this point before, but I do like Mega Man 4. I think number 2 is a damn well perfect game, right? And I do like 3. But I could appreciate 4, even if I thought you were just making a meme with me.
No. Here's the thing. I think 2 is great by virtue of how much better it is than 1 and 3. I think it is a mirage a bit. I mean, it's a great game. I don't want anybody to be like, oh, GP hates 2. I love number 2. It is a solid entry, but it's because it's so much better than 1 and stronger than 3. 3 is a great game, but again, and I've gone through this ad nauseum, I'm not going to bore everybody with it, but it has too much stuff in it, too much fluff, too much extra stuff that is never explained and is not necessary. Whereas 2, they just reinvented what they needed to from 1 to make it more interesting and tighter, and I think that's why it's so good. It's a close second place to me after number 4. But I think 4, they ramped it up and refined it, and then they hit 4, and it was so great. And then you look at 5 and 6, and the quality started to go back down. So to me, 4 is like the precipice, the paramount, the tip top, whatever the fuck you want to say. It's as good as the Mega Man series ever got, in my humble but still infinitely correct opinion. Also, 9 and 10 were good, but 4 is the titties.
I don't think I played 9 or 10, but I will say out of the Mega Man games as a kid that I owned, it was only 3 and 4. So to be fair. So I agree with you. 4, I think, is definitely the point, the apex of the franchise. And
Apex,
then it's all downhill from there.
The zenith.
The zenith, yeah.
Why are we doing like... We should have a thesaurus bend with this sort of... Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well, for a while, we were doing the word of the day on the podcast as a joke, but that just turned to be rapscallion every other episode. So
I forgot about that, yeah. I forgot.
Got to bring that back.
We should. Everybody, yeah. We should make that a thing. If you're listening, join our Discord, and then I will starting tomorrow, because we're going to record an episode tomorrow. I will start bringing back word of the day, where I will drop a word that is not typically used in sentences, and if you can figure out what it is, you will win nothing, but we will tell you if you're right.
You'll just win mad respect from the Press B crew. That's all.
There you go. I like that.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, what's your number? So number 4 was Mega Man 4? That's apt.
4 was 4. Yeah, that's why I went ahead and moved it around to there.
But surely number 3 is Mega Man 3, right?
No, but I like that. I like that logic. The next one is going to be the Zelda franchise. Specifically, and this one I think is going to make people scratch their heads, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link.
Okay.
Now, Paulsh and I agree on a great many things where it comes to video games. So many of our agreements come from nostalgia or first exposures. And it's kind of that way for me with Zelda 2. I love, love, love the Zelda franchise. There's a lot, actually, of Zelda games out there that I have yet to play. I just did a blind run of Link to the Past about a year ago.
Right, I remember that.
Or a first playthrough. I shouldn't call it a blind run, but it was a first... Well, I guess it was a blind run. But every time I play a Zelda game, I love it. I've watched Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is one of the few games I can watch anybody play anytime for a long time. Never gets old.
Right. Yeah.
But Zelda 2 was the first Zelda game I had ever played, and I have very fond memories of trial and error. I kind of cut my teeth with that game because it was the RPG-esque feeling of some of the Final Fantasy games, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes, but without all the talking. So a lot of it was trial and error and exploration. And sorry, we're not going to give you very concise or very well-written cues or clues, so figure it out. Yeah. And I remember walking a couple blocks to the public library back in like 1997 when we didn't have the internet, but the library did, and printing out maps and codes and just giving them a dime for every page that I printed out, and they realized we are severely undercharging for color printouts. So I love, again, the soundtrack to 2. Very, very classic, especially the dungeon or the castle themes. I love the ability to choose your upgrades whenever you get enough experience. I thought that was brilliant, and that gave it some replayability. Never mind the New Game Plus that you can do.
Did you ever do a New Game Plus?
I have, but not anywhere near recently. Like it was in probably the late 2000s, like 08, 09.
Like I know Zelda 2 there's a lot of hate for it from a lot of folks, but I feel like recently, at least the last year or so, at least on Twitch and hang around a lot of people's streams, there's more of appreciation for Zelda 2 than there has been, I've noticed. I like the game. I think it's fine. I treat it more of a different genre, right? It's definitely a platformer. Right. It feels different. It's a solid title. I like it a lot. I was playing it recently, and it reminds me how lost you get in that game. I don't know where damn well anything is in that game. I know like the first 2 or 3 dungeons pretty good, but after that, forget it. I have to break open a guide. But it's an enjoyable game, though. The spirit of exploration, right? Like when you look at Breath of the Wild and you go back to Zelda 2, there is a connection, it feels like, with the exploration spirit in those games.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And I think one of the great things about video game streaming and YouTube videos and all this stuff is people can watch somebody play a game and be like, you know what, maybe this isn't as crappy as I thought it was when I was a kid. Maybe I need to give it another chance. Because I think our taste in video games, similar to our taste buds, evolve and change as we grow. So maybe you didn't like Zelda 2 the first time you tried it, but in the years since, maybe you've been exposed to a different type of similar gameplay that reframes how you would play Zelda 2. So you go back, you try it, and you realize, I just wasn't in the right place to play this game, as opposed to this game sucks.
That's true. Golden Axe is like a tomato. I hated tomatoes as a kid. But having played Golden Axe recently, I can appreciate it now. I like it.
Sure.
But on the same thing, same tone, you have Donkey Kong Country is just a rotten piece of meat, no matter how way you slice it.
No, it's a great game.
Yeah,
you're gonna be pissed when I tell you what my number 2 choice is.
All right. Well, Zelda 2 though is a great pick.
Yeah.
It's one where I kind of wish they would do a remaster or at some point, or another game in that similar style. I'd love to see another 2D Zelda game. I don't think we'll ever get it though.
Or even give us like a big, vast exploration type of Zelda game with that same map. I mean, you can flesh it out, you can make it bigger, of course, and add things, but just let us know that that's what Hyrule looks like in some other follow-up, and that would be cool. With the cave and the trophies and people hiding mirrors and stuff like that.
I just want an NPC named Error. I want them to just bring that joke back.
Well, and this is one of those, when we talk about like the fluidity of the lists, I'm pretty sure I'm always going to want to have a Zelda game on my top 5. You look at it like Desert Island. If you can take 5 games and a TV and a console or whatever to a desert island, what game are you going to take? What's your list?
Yeah.
And there's always a Zelda. It's not always Zelda 2. Most of the time it is, but, really an argument or a discussion could be had over Zelda 1. To me, I think the reason I like 2 over 1 is 2 has different playability things. With 1, you can choose what to spend your money on and the order you want to do things, but I don't know. 2 just does it for me. And again, that said, there's still a lot of Zelda I have yet to play. So
yeah. All right. No, that's a fair point. Desert Island for me would definitely have a Zelda game in there. Probably a Mario title and probably a Final Fantasy. Like, it just seems like a no-brainer. Those franchises are just core to Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, so okay, I take that back. You're gonna love my top 2.
I can probably guess.
Yeah, I hate how vanilla and kind of predictable these are, but I like the discussion about the reason why, because people play these games and they come away with different experiences based on their own lives, and I think that's really where the magic of video games lies. You can have an identifiably or ostensibly great, well-developed game, but really it's the context of your own internal experiences that shape what's... God, I sound so preachy.
What is this, Twitter?
Number 2 is Bible Adventures. No, it's not. How fucked up would that be if number 2 was Bible Adventures and 1 was like Doom?
Or Super Noah's Ark, yeah. Awesome. It's classic games.
Yeah, so for me, number 2 is going to be a Mario game. Now, This one, as I was putting the list together, I went through all of the ones that I love the most and tried to figure out what should be on there. I even discussed, to myself, should I just say the original Super Mario Brothers? Because that's such a great game. And yes, I've played it, 100%, speed ran it. I've done all these things. But, then I thought about, what about Doki Doki, Mario 2? And I can play that game an infinite number of times. Like, I never get tired of playing 2. But it still doesn't feel quite right enough to be the best, in my opinion, of the Mario franchise. If I'm going to kill 12 minutes, yeah, I'll run through that. It's bright, it's playful, it's colorful. Yeah. It set up things that will be, introduced or maintained later on in the franchise. I love the game. I'm not one of those haters for 2.
I love 2. Like, 2 is probably, It's not my favorite Mario game, but I do love it quite a bit. But it's interesting you say Mario 1, because I don't think anybody ever says Mario Brothers 1 is their favorite. It's almost always like 3 or World or something. So it's iconic. It kicked things off, but it doesn't get as much love, I think, as the other ones of the franchise.
Sure. Well, okay, so that kind of takes me to where I was. Like, the main crux of my internal wrestling today was between 3 and World and 64.
Right.
Ultimately, I'll let you deduce which one I choose. The thing about World is great. World is playful. It is as colorful and playful as Doki Doki. It's number 2. To me, those are kind of cousin games. I know it sounds silly, but in my head, that's how it works. But it's not 2. It's not World. My favorite thing about World is there's different exits for the stages. You know what I mean? There's different ways to complete a stage.
Right.
Really, that's the marker for how you tell how much of the game you've done, is the number of exits that you found. And, you can play the long haul for the game, you can 100% it, or you can speed run it, you can do Star Road, you can do the bonus stages after. There's so much to love about World, but it's not quite there for me. So then I think, is it between, it's obviously between 64 and 3. Oh, and as I'm saying this now, I'm second guessing my thought train from earlier. When I put together this list this time, I said 64. The reason it's not 3 is because I chose 64. Literally, that's it. 3 is so great. It's got shortcuts. You could speed run it. It's got Tanuki suits. It's got the Hammer Brother. It's got all these various different things that it introduced, and that they've kept on in, like, the 3D world and other, things later on with the suits. Oh, man, I do love 3, but I think ultimately 64 edges it out just barely. Because all those things that I mentioned, with the exception of the suits, you have that same kind of ability to play it in 64. You've got, the ability to 100% it. You can go in any order that you want, which is really the one thing that I think it has over 3. It doesn't have warp whistles, but you can do 0-star runs. You can do 16 or 60 or 72. There's no shortage of different ways to play it.
Right.
the one thing that, oddly enough, is in the pro column for 64 is that there are sections of the game that I hate. There's no World of 3 where I'm like, fuck this. It's close because there's underwater and there's ice levels. But there are one or two places in 64 where I'm like, fuck this game, man. Fuck this game. But
because you hate some of it, that's why it beats Mario 3.
Yes, because it evokes multiple emotions, like emotional responses, guttural responses, as opposed to Mario 3, which is, this is pleasant. This is absolutely wonderful. There's no part of 3. I've never raged on 3. I could see how people do, but I think my inability to rage on 3 is not because of the difficulty level. I think it's because it's like cold pizza. It's still pretty good. So even the worst version of 3 is still pretty fucking great. But then you look at 64, and I've never raged really with it, but I get to this point where I'm like, I swear to God, if I die here again, you have that, you don't want to quit, but you want to power through it. And that's 64, man. That's Hazy Maze Castle or Cave or whatever. And once you get through that, then it's just clear skies. But I fucking love 64. Can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I didn't mind the Hazy Maze Cave. I did play through a good chunk of this game recently. I feel like now I need to go back to it and play it from start to finish.
Yeah.
Because a few of you guys have said how much you love Mario 64, and I don't hate it. I like the game. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. But I don't... Something about having to go back to the same maps again and again for stars kind of bothered me. And it's, as you said, there's some parts that are just rage-inducing. I think I even said before in an earlier episode, the desert level, the part where the vulture has your hat.
Yeah.
That son of a bitch. And chasing him around, like flying around in that game was terrible. I did not like that or the power-ups at all in that game.
Really?
And something about some of the levels felt... I'm trying to give it a break because it was revolutionary for 3D platformers.
Yeah.
But some of the maps felt really... I look at people who download Unity or Unreal Engine to tinker with and make their own little fan games. Mm-hmm. And like some of those Bowser stages feel like really crappy made Flash games. Like just in terms of like 3D games with just bits and pieces strung together. And I don't like those levels. And it's only those parts I don't like. Like the rest of the game, I think is quite solid. I love the ice level. That's the only time I'll ever say I like an ice level is Mario 64. Mostly because of the penguin sliding, I think is amazing.
Well, it's got two very solid ice stages. Yeah.
Yeah, and both are fun. And there's a lot of fun moments in there. But something about having to go and get all the stars is a bit of a chore for me because some of them I do not like for that salt. But as you said, it's great because you don't have to do all that. You can say, I've had enough of this painting. I'm done. I'll move to the next one. And you have that option and you can beat the game without getting all the stars. You can skip the ones you don't like, which I think is something fantastic. And that's something they've done in other Mario games as well, where the stars are optional. And I think that's a good way of going about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everything you just said was really just spot on. In my mind, I kind of, every time I start this game, I still feel like I did the first time I played it, in that there is a sense of scope and size. Yeah. Mario 3 was a big game, but just because of all the numbers of stages and the 8 different worlds. This is a big game by virtue of subdividing. There's this one building with all these different rooms, and there's all these different paintings, and there's all these different stars inside all these different paintings. So there it seems big. I will always remember having a sense of awe the first time I went into the TikTok clock stage, level 14 or whatever, standing there and hitting the view where you're not Lakitu, you're Mario, and just looking up and seeing how high it goes, and it's just a giant cylinder that you're in. And I remember in Hazy Maze Cave going to the Loch Ness Monster area, and 12-year-old me was terrified of water, that had things in it. I love swimming, but oceans and lakes scared the piss out of me. So just things like that, I still, and I think the flying, maybe, yes, it is jank now, but I still see that game through 12-year-old eyes. So to me, it was fun and challenging and a blast. So, I love 64. I'm glad I said all the words because now I do feel good about 64 being on the list.
Well, I like the first opening sequence, just when you run up to that castle. It's just very much an awe-inspiring moment. And there's nothing quite like that in any of the Mario games, right? Like even in the ones like Odyssey, which I like Odyssey, but you don't have that same like, oh my gosh, Peach's castle, larger than life, right in front of you. And you're right, it's such an expansive game. Yeah, I can appreciate that. I still love Mario 3, maybe more.
Okay.
But this is like, they're both amazing games, right? You can't dispute it.
So, a completely nerdy thing, and some of you people out there hear us talk about this, and usually it's a joke, but this is 100% true. I actually do have a Mind Palace, and the Mind Palace is Peach's castle from Mario 64.
Okay.
No, it's a thing that I read about and learned about in my late 20s, and I have this horrible fear of being forgetful because I spent so much of my life kind of as just this idiot. And while I still am, now I can remember the stupid stuff that I've said. So, but anyway, yeah, the Peach's castle in my palace, it's bigger, but that's the rubric that it was all built upon. I know how cringy and nerdy all that is, but that's a little bit of an insight into the inner workings of me.
Well, hey, that's what this episode's for. The inner brains of GP and how he can pick Mega Man 4.
It's not that I can pick Mega Man 4, it's that I can eloquently make a decent argument for Mega Man 4, right?
Yeah, and you totally did. All right. So number 3 was Mario 64.
No, number 3 was Zelda 2. Number 2 was Mario 64.
So fast I forget Zelda 2. Wow.
I can teach you the Mind Palace thing. Or even just a pen and paper, dude. I'm kidding. You're nailing it with the interviewing, and I adored it. I want to say this. I adored the episode of your top 5 and then Paul's top 5, which came out just a few weeks ago. I thought it was incredibly insightful, and I think if you have never thought about being a professional interviewer, you should absolutely do that because I think you're wonderful at it.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm just glad I'm doing okay because I'm not high this week. So.
Really? Because I feel like I seem so much more interesting when you are high.
Oh, gee, thanks. Tell my wife that. All right. So number 2 was Mario 64.
Yeah.
What's the number 1? Wait, hold on. Let me guess. Let me guess. It's not Moon Crystal.
Spoiler alerts.
It's not Moon Crystal. I gotta say it's gonna be Final Fantasy 4 or Mega Man X. Those are my guesses. But you lead me up to it.
Both very good guesses, and one of those is correct.
Okay.
So this is where I leave you. Everybody have a great night. And no. Before we get to that, I do want to throw out a couple of honorable mentions, though, if that's okay.
Yes.
Because I realize these are all retro games. There are some games that are newer that I've played that I've thoroughly enjoyed. But the honorable mentions actually are also retro.
Not a modern game on this episode.
Not a single one, but it's the retro therapy. Like, this is, I think, what people
It's
expect.
on brand.
Right. So honorable mentions, I thought to myself about, okay, the 3 games that I speedrun fairly well. Ninja Gaiden, great game. I love it. I love the series.
Yeah.
Not quite there for me with the top 5. Definitely top 10 title, but not top 5. In fact, these honorable mentions obviously are all top 10. Battletoads. The only reason Battletoads is not on here is because I don't have the nostalgia for it, because I just did that blind run 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
But since then, doing the speed running, learning, the glitches, learning the full playthrough, seeing the different ways people play it and the different strats, I really am in love with Battletoads. And it's got, I think, probably the single greatest anxiety-inducing stage of all time, and that is the rat race.
That one, really?
Doesn't matter how good no matter how good you are at it, there's always going to be a twinge of like, oh shit, am I going to fuck this up? Now, obviously, you can glitch through it, not ever have to do it, but the one thing I hate about the game is that you can glitch through it and not have to do it. I mean, you have to if you're going for speedrun time, but
Right.
It's such a wonderfully put together and designed stage. The rats get faster, the stages get more tricky, or the stage gets more tricky, and the music gets more and more anxiety-inducing. It is such a well-composed, designed stage. And then you have to fight the BDSM bull at the end, and I'm here for every bit of it. If I ever cosplay, I'll probably end up I'll be the BDSM.
That's a deep pull if you ever go to a
Minotaur.
convention.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Battletoads is a great game. It's one that I don't think I'll ever beat because it's so hard.
Sure.
But I can totally appreciate the graphics, the music, design. It's solid.
Sure.
All right. But it's not Battletoads.
Right. And then, last honorable mention because of the speedrunning thing is Silver Surfer. The reason it didn't make it on there is obviously I didn't have the nostalgia. We did the blind run a couple years ago. I fell in love with it. Been doing the speedruns, and I'm still ranked third. I think if I was the world record holder for it, I would probably add it on there because of my ego. I think we all know I have just this epic ego. But I'm a little bitter about being third. I used to be second, then somebody got a new record, so now I'm third. But also, kind of like with Tecmo Super Bowl, I'm not a huge fan of that genre of side-scrolling, shooters. I enjoy Life Force and those types of games, but I very rarely ever seek them out. So Silver Surfer I thought about, but no, it's not going to be on there. But it is a great game.
You think you're salty at third place. At least you're not down to 24th.
Well, it helps that there's only like 14 people running it. So.
Yeah.
And then also, of course, Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy IV is my favorite game of all time. 6, you guys have all heard me say this. I will. I'm getting
tough.
disheveled here. Yeah. If anybody ever wants to call me on it, I will absolutely 100% always admit 6 is probably the better game. 4 is my favorite, though. Again, Desert Island. You can only take one. I'm going 4. 6 is emotionally damaging and like wrecking. If I ever want a good cry, I will think about Cyan.
Right.
Didn't used to be the case, but now I'm a husband and a father.
Oh, yeah.
And his whole thing. But that's what 6 is a series of more and more tragic events. And then little bits of hope that you try to regather for this big, awesome ultimate ending. And it's so well done, and I fucking love 6. But for me, 4 was the introduction to role-playing games. For me, I learned how to read and speed read, kind of doing Final Fantasy IV. The characters are so much fun, and they're all so varied. There's as much as I love customizing characters, there is something that is comforting about knowing Kain will always be a dragoon. Reddy is always going to be, my wife, and Sid. I'm sorry, a caller. Sid's always going to be that cantankerous old, Master Roshi guy. So,
right.
I don't know. 4 is just great. The OST, but you could say that with most Final Fantasies. But 4, I don't have anything bad to say about it. In fact, even the remake is maybe the one game that's better than the classic, which is so bizarre to have a remake be better than the original. That goes against a very, very firm belief that I have that nothing can ever be better than the original version. Because by definition, the original version is. It is 100% all it can ever be. So every remake can never be 100%, even if you like it more. But that said, the DS remake with the voice acting, the updated soundtrack, the gameplay, the augment system, to me, even better than Final Fantasy IV for the SNES. That's
a pretty bold statement.
I know. It is the exception that proves the rule. Other than Johnny Cash singing Nine Inch Nails' Hurt, I don't think any remake has ever been as good as that.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Johnny Cash wrote that song.
Well, he did, but even Johnny Cash, even Trent Reznor came out and said, okay, yeah, that was better than what we did. And I love Nine Inch Nails. I love Trent Reznor. But yeah, Hurt.
Yeah.
God dang it. Anyway.
Damn.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy IV is I don't know. I love 6 personally, but I can definitely appreciate 4. The music, like you said, is amazing. Just the opening scene, right, with the Red Wings. That theme for me, whenever somebody says Final Fantasy IV, that song just plays in my head, right? Uh-huh. The opening sequence is definitely burned in there. It's the other thing too is like from Final Fantasy 1 and the NES, and then it was Super Nintendo, Final Fantasy, what is 4, what we got is 2. That jump, right, as a kid, because that's what we had as a kid in North America, 1 and then 2, NES to Super Nintendo, and it's such an amazing leap forward. Right. And there's definitely that nostalgia trip for sure, and how well it was, and how different it was, and cool it was. I do miss the character customizing from the first game, but the story is infinitely better, right? Like 1 barely even had a story. So
right, yeah, 1 was just a series of things to do.
Right.
To get to this end that was incredibly ambiguous. And then you're right, to go from just having the availability of that, that's like your entire reference for Final Fantasy. And then to get such a tremendous upgrade in Final Fantasy IV, aka Final Fantasy II. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was staggering. It was jaw-dropping. And it made it easy to forgive the poor translation. It made it easy to forgive, things like that. They completely nerfed it. The one that we got is considered the easy type. The hard type, which they later released in other ports, they did it as part of Final Fantasy Chronicles on the PlayStation. The hard type.
Right, with the cinematic added, yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's not that hard to find that, but this is my catcher in the rye game. Whenever there's a new version out, I have to go and I have to buy it. And I don't really know how to explain that, but it is kind of not an impulse, but like a compulsion to own as much of this game as I can.
Wait, you own this already, don't you? You have a copy of this.
Okay, so I've got a loose cart. I've got the CIB still in the plastic for Final Fantasy II. I've got, and even earlier today over my lunch break, I was playing the randomizer, which if you haven't played the randomizer for Final Fantasy IV, you got to try it. It's brilliant, and it's one of those things where if I could, I would play it, probably half a dozen times a day, just because it's this game that I love, and now it's it's a randomized thing. I don't know.
It's more replayable. Is that free enterprise?
Yes, free enterprise is what it's called.
Yeah, I need to play that, or at least try it.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And I've always loved the idea of the phrase is there, but by the grace of God go I. The kind of coin flip stuff, and that's kind of what it was with Cecil and Golbez, which spoiler alert, they're brothers. One just got corrupted by this dark force, and I always thought that was such a cool thing. In fact, if somebody ever made a port of this game, or a ROM hack where Cecil is the one who got corrupted and your main character is Golbez, I think that would be amazing. But Golbez has always been such a great character. I've actually got this sizable Golbez tattoo on my back, kind of as a tribute just to the game as a whole. But it's I don't know, man. I can't say enough good stuff about this game. It gives me the feels. It's the first game I ever beat that when I beat it, I put the controller down and I didn't weep, but I had that melancholic feeling of I'm not ready for this to be done yet. I'm not ready to leave this world, and yeah, that's my number one game. If I could only play one game for the rest of my life, I'd want it to be Final Fantasy IV.
Well, I mean, it's tough to argue with that. It definitely is a solid title.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. Do you want to just recap your list real quick before we finish it off?
I don't even know if I remember it.
It's changed again.
Right. So there's Tecmo Super Bowl at 5.
Right.
4, we have Mega Man 4. 3 was Zelda 2. 2 was Mario 3. I'm kidding. Mario 64. And then the best game of all time is Final Fantasy 4.
All right. That's an awesome list, man.
You're an awesome list, man.
Well, we're all an awesome list. We're a tall drink of water.
There you go. I'm a bit sketchy, but anyway.
All right. Well, if you guys enjoyed listening to this episode, please do check us out.
Now that I'm thinking about top 5.
rolling it back.
We're rolling. And I'm kidding, of course. Let's wrap it up. I've taken enough of your time today.
No, I just make sure we finish up because I know you have to go.
Metal Storm is a great game. I'll say that.
I've not played that yet, actually.
Oh,
I watched Cloaked Alien play it, though.
Oh, and, yeah. Well, Cloaked is great as a streamer, and yes. Cloaked doing Metal Storm is dope.
He's such a patient gamer. That's so much more than me. Anyway, if you've enjoyed listening to this episode, please do consider donating to our Patreon. It helps with the hosting costs and doing some of this fun stuff that we like to do, like advertising. Yay! It's great. As well, if you want to, engage with us a little bit more, you can always join our Discord. I don't have links on me because Paul's just taking a break. But if you go to Press B to Cancel on Twitter, I got a handy tweet promoted to the top there that has all these great links. You can also buy a t-shirt because t-shirts are great.
In preparation for that, Paul sent me a quick little voice message of the links. Can I play that real quick?
Yeah, sure. God damn it. Son of a bitch.
It had to be done.
At least it's the end of the episode.
Yeah.
That joke's got to die. We just got to let it die.
We do it because we love you. I know that's messed up, but anyway.
It's all right. We'll fix it in post.
There's nothing to fix.
GP, where can people find you before you go?
Oh, well, I used to stream regularly under the Retro Therapy on twitch.tv. Hopefully that will be coming back. There's a lot of movement happening in real estate right now, so I've been otherwise indisposed. But as soon as everything calms down, I'm back at it. Otherwise, just keep checking me out here on Press B to Cancel. And otherwise, if you have missed out on any of my drum content or video content, you can find me on YouTube as The Retro Therapy.
Fantastic. And I'm Sick Jake. You can find me on Twitch sometimes. I was really good for a while. I'll get back to it. And on Twitter, SICJAKE. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Bye, guys and gals.
Special thanks for music go to Arthur the Last Ancient on Spotify or The Last Ancient on Bandcamp. For more episodes, please visit our website at pressbtocancel.com. And also, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Patreon. As always, thank you. This has been
Press B to cancel.
Banished.